YouTube, Facebook, todos os canais. Bem-vindos, boa noite a todos e todas. Estou muito contente, né, hoje de estar, que temos aqui conosco, né, Flora. Flora, eu quero agradecer, eu sei que ela entende perfeitamente português, né, e ela fala também português muito bem, mas a palestra vai ser em inglês, né, porque ela vai se sentir mais cômoda. Mas ela é praticamente carioca, eu sei disso, né? Ela quase carioca, quase brasileira, gostei disso, exatamente. Flora, a nossa história do IED com a Flora é uma história longa, né? A Flora já teve uma conexão com o IED Madrid, especialmente. Quem fez a ponte conosco foram nossos colegas do IED Madrid, foi já o ano passado. A Flora já esteve conosco no ano passado, colaborou concretamente, fez um workshop no curso de design de moda. E ela vem com frequência, né? Menos do que ela gostaria, né? Ela gostaria de realmente mudar para cá. A gente tentou, o ano passado, a gente não vai desistir de fazer isso, de fazer uma conexão maior com o Royal College, que é onde normalmente a Flora trabalha e realiza suas pesquisas e as suas aulas. Mas um dia a gente vai conseguir trazer definitivamente a Flora para cá. Flora absolutamente, Flora McLean o que eu definiria realmente uma pessoa, uma designer que pratica a arte para vestir, né? Ela entende a arte, a moda, o design com uma interconexão muito grande. Ela é podemos dizer, né, que você é a única especialista do Royal College of Art em chapéus e acessórios de moda. Então, é uma joia rara, né, dentro do Royal College, e ela desenvolveu realmente o próprio projeto artístico, o percurso artístico e autoral, não somente no Royal College, mas também desenvolvendo uma própria marca, né, porque ela está à frente há muitos anos da House of Flora, né, que é a própria marca, o próprio estúdio de design, do qual hoje falará muito, e sobretudo falará do próprio processo de criação. E tem umas coisas fantásticas aqui, né? Eu vejo a hora de entender melhor de tudo isso. A Flora produz com materiais muito variados, ela vai explicar isso com mais detalhe, o PVC, o Perpex, o feltro, o couro, o folheado de madeira, eu tive que anotar porque são muitas coisas. Ela experimentou com alumínio, com aço, com nylon, e com outros materiais e materiais inovadores, né? Então é interessante essa conexão que ela faz entre o uso dos materiais e as várias formas geométricas, né? Ela é muito atrevida nesses percursos. Então, nas próprias criações, junta a arte moderna com o estudo e o uso muito específico dos materiais, mas sempre pensando com uma cabeça de designer. No sentido, pensando no usuário final, pensando no uso real das peças. Então, realmente, acho que é o momento de deixar a palavra para a Flora, estará conosco hoje. Eu espero de ter mais oportunidade para a Flora voltar a colaborar conosco. I really hope to have you here more and more times. So, thank you so much. Muito, muito obrigado. Não vou falar mais, não vou roubar mais o tempo. É com você. Obrigado, Flora. Eu acho que uma salva de palmas para acolher ela, né? Com esse yellow, que eu falei, um yellow criativo, amarelo criativo. Ela falou, não, é o amarelo agressivo, né? Que criatividade e agressividade muitas vezes estão juntos. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigada, Fabio. Reverb. Boa noite, gente. Thank you very much for coming. I have got it's kind of like two talks tonight, because I'm talking about my work and how I kind of arrived at doing these kind of things, my kind of background, my family, my interests, my inspiration. But I'm also going to talk about the school where I work. It's very important to me, that school, because that's also where I studied. So it's kind of two halves to the talk. Some of the images are in a bit of a pocket by Gunzer. There's a lot of a jumble of images, but hopefully you can see the connection between my influences and my interest in coming to Rio, I've been here 10 times in 4 years. I quite like this place. And I keep coming back for more, although the buses are terrifying. So I'm going to make a start. So yeah, I've had an interesting life. I'm very lucky. My father's an artist, and I come from a very creative family. I share a studio with my dad. He's a sculptor, and his dad was an architect. The first time I ever saw images of Brazil were in books that belonged to my dad's dad, who was this fantastic modernist architect. And he had pictures of Brasilia, big volumes. He collected many books about modernist architecture. And I used to pore over these books. It looked like a spaceship. It looked like the future. So eventually, years and years later, I come and see, I call it my church in Niteroi, the MAC, which really is like a spaceship. Anyway, I'll make a start with the images. Hopefully I can get this to work. So this is me in my studio. I make a lot of mess when I'm at my studio. So yeah, this is the background. My dad's an artist. The grandfather was an architect. My brother's an architect too. He also teaches in London, in Westminster. I think the difference with me and my brother, that he thinks a lot. He doesn't do much. He writes, he thinks deeply. Me and my dad, we do things. We make stuff. And we make things happen. And so recently we've been working together and putting the work in a space, a bit like a gallery. Prior to that, I've been working in fashion, showing 2 collections a year and going to Paris and selling my wares, and it gets very tiring doing this, and you'll find this out. Recently, it's become more like an exhibition of art pieces and doing special projects. This is the label. The design of the actual graphics kind of preceded what I was doing. The images that you'll see kind of go with this logo now, but when I made this logo, the work didn't look like it. So I had to make the work look like the logo, if that makes sense. This is kind of just a lot of words that you might not want to bother reading, but it's this sort of background to the company and how I kind of operate. And yeah, the way that it started, when I left college, I studied women's wear fashion. They didn't have accessories at the school then. So all my peers, all the guys in my class, they all knew that I was going to do accessories. But I didn't know that. But they knew before me. Because I was always in the workshop with bits of plastic or bits of wood or bits of metal, glass and ceramics, leather. I was very rarely on a sewing machine with fabric. Although I do love making, I made my dress. I like making stretchy things and bikinis and body conscious things. But at college, I was mostly found making other things in wood and Madeira and plastic. So this is my church. This is the nearest thing I get to. I've been living in Niteroi and half in Niteroi and half in Rio while I stayed this time. So whenever I'm there, I walk there every day and have a little sit, and can't quite believe where I'm sitting. And it amazes me that the way that it's made is like a giant hat, and you're living in a giant hat. And you'll see later I made a 3D printed version of this hat that looks a bit like an architectural model for this building. I can't believe that building. This is very early work when I was at school. I like working with plastic, and I was also working with a very good friend and collaborator, Nick Crosby. He works at a company called Inflate, and we work with air. So I was trying to make shapes with air and plastic. And there's a link between this image and the things you'll see right at the end, because we've now got the machine at the Royal College to do this kind of work. We've got the high frequency welder, which looks a bit like a sewing machine in terms of space. And you're sitting at a bench, but you can press, and the frequency welds the plastic together so you can make inflatable thing. Am I speaking too fast? Okay. So she's got an inflatable collar. She also had an inflatable hemline. This is very dark, but it's a spiral hat that looks a bit like the entrance to the Mac. I found this when I was walking with Robert the other day, this concrete structure in Copacabana. And then I realized it looks remarkably like my BA collection skirt on the left, which actually was a copy of a Mexican architect. These were like, the whole of the collection was about plans for structures very similar to the Mac. So all the plans and drawings and the geometry, I used all of that to make clothes. Nobody knew what I was doing at the time. I have to tell you this. My teachers didn't know what to do with me, and said that, which I found quite depressing at the time. They said, "We don't know what to do with you. We don't know how to help you. We don't know what you're doing." Which is, you know, I mean, I was just a little bit too far ahead. In fashion, you have to be a bit ahead, maybe 2 years ahead. I feel a bit sometimes like I might have been 10, 15 years ahead. And now the students that I'm teaching, they're kind of ready for me. And we're kind of ready for each other. And I feel like I can help people who are like I was. So it's kind of like karma. It all makes sense in the end. But at the time, it was very hard to be a student in a fashion school when you weren't making things out of fabric. And this is my BA. Actually, I think I'm more proud of this than I am of my MA stuff. I think it still looks kind of bold. Terrible images, but this is me and my dad in the studio. He's on one side of the wall, and I'm on the other side of the wall. We don't speak much, but we kind of share similar thoughts. And every now and again, we make each other a cup of tea. I thought it would last about 6 months, me and him sharing a studio. I've been there nearly 5 years now. I actually kept my old studio because I thought it was going to be a disaster. But it's worked out really well. And now lots of the work looks very similar. You'll see later that certain objects that I make look really good with his paintings. And that's another studio image. I do this other collaboration with a hairdresser, hairstylist called Neil Moody. And he produces amazing hairstyles for runway shows all over the world, travels from New York to London all the time. And for I think about the last 10, maybe 12 years, we've done this project making hats that look like hair. And this was meant to be Sonia Rykiel. And you can remove her curls. They have Velcro attachments, so you can change your hair. But I think we've made about 30 of these things now. And it's just a kind of ongoing project. He keeps kind of saying, who can we do next? Let's do Khalees, or let's do, Janet Jackson, or he's very, very interesting to work with. These are, again, very early pieces. I just thought I brought these along because of maybe there's some fashion students here that are at the beginning of their journey. And so these are a kind of much more bold structural pieces that I was doing early on that none of my teachers understood. The first paid work that I got when I left school was with the Royal Ballet doing some costumes. And I was sure that this was going to be my future, and all my work was going to be in the ballet, and I was going to be on the stage making ballet costumes. It worked out pretty well. We connected their heads together with this giant spring. So for the first half an hour of the dance, they're connected. So it's quite a beautiful piece. It was with a very famous choreographer, and he's an ex-dancer called Ashley Page. And he ended up being he ran the school up in Scotland, Scottish National Ballet. But this is quite early in his choreographic career. This is another one of the hairstyle. This is meant to be Grace Jones, the front cover of her album. Does that mean anything? Robert's nodding. There's an image of Grace Jones on the cover of one of the most famous albums she's done, and this is meant to be her hairstyle. I actually want to give it to her. She lives in Putney, apparently, which is very near me. I might deliver it. This is the most fantastic book. If you can try and find this online, Moholy Nagy, for me, is a massive inspiration in terms of thinking and making and teaching. And there's a book called Vision in Motion. And I bought this book for £1, and from the library, actually. They were selling it in the library for £1. And it's like a blueprint for an art school. He ran Chicago Institute for Design in the 1930s and 40s, and the book contains so many amazing test pieces and sort of insight into how an art school should be and how we should share and how we should work together with different departments and test things out. So lots of the work you see in the book isn't his work, it's the work from his students. But it's the way it's written is really funny because he knows how lazy students are. So he's put very small compartments of text. He says, I know you're not going to read the next page, so I'm going to put a very small paragraph so you can just take this home, think about it, and maybe make something in response to it. So you don't have to read the whole book. It's made especially for lazy students. It's great. This was a very exciting moment. I think I'd had my first child. I was at home trying to make ends meet, making things on the floor. I realized making hats would be much more easy because you don't need so much space. When you make clothes, you need tables, you need floor. I lived in a very, very small flat, and I had a baby. And I was just thinking, I need to make stuff, otherwise I'm going to go mad. And I created a form for this hat. This is 22 years old, this shape. It's almost vintage now. I poured plaster in a fruit bowl and made a form that looked like an acorn. Would they know what an acorn is here? Because they won't have oak trees. Yeah. There's a fruit on a very English tree that looks like this, that has a little hat. Anyway, I make this fruit bowl shape plaster, mixing it up. My daughter's helping me mix it up. And I sent this to the guy that I worked for with the inflatable things, because he had this machine where you can dip metal forms into, to dip mold in plastic. This is how this is formed. Forward wind. Friends of mine that I studied with ended up making magazines or working for magazines. Many fashion students didn't end up making clothes or working at fashion houses. Most of my friends ended up starting magazines. People who worked at The Face at that time had just started, they just left, Dazed and Confused. Do you know about these magazines here? Do they travel? Dazed and Confused. I mean, this no longer exists, but the people who left Dazed went to work at The Face, and we all were friends. My friend calls me up. She says, David LaChapelle wants to take a photograph of Beyonce, and they want to pour honey all over her body, and they want a hat, and they need a bikini, and they need it tomorrow. And I was like, okay, well, I've got the hat. I can make the bikini. And I said, is there any money involved? And they said, oh, yeah, whatever you want. What do you want? I think, well, I'll get back to you on the price. And at that time, I didn't have an oven. So I thought, well, I'll ask for the amount of an oven. My friend told me, he said, you know, pricing is very personal. It's a very personal thing, Flora. Trying to work out how to price your designs and what you need. What you need is going to change throughout your life. What do you need right now? Do you need new shoes? Do you need a new oven? Do you need a holiday? You know, do you need your rent paying? What is it? I said, I need an oven. And they paid for the oven. And I went to the magazine and I picked up 500 quid's worth of cash, which is a lot of money. It's still a lot of money now. But then it was even more money because that was 20 years ago. So that was a bikini that they didn't use. They didn't cover her in honey because she didn't agree to it. And they sprayed a grey hat of mine, which before I'd made the red one, they sprayed it red, which is so that's why it looks nearly quasi vermelho. It's not. It's actually Cinza, this hat. Anyway, long story. But anyway, Beyonce's wearing my hat on the face, so that's pretty cool. So it raised the prices. This is a very nice. This is quite a recent, fairly recent bit of editorial where someone's really understood. I don't know whether it's complete fluke, but they've put the hat in exactly the kind of place I'd want to be seen wearing a hat. So when you see images like this, it's like, they get it, they get it. Finally, they get it. Again, this is, do you see the connection? Do you see the shape? Are you with me? Triangular. Triangle. Oh no, back to the beret. This is another one of the hairstyle hats. This is meant to be the Marcel. And we've made many colors. I sell a lot of these, and people wear them. I thought they would just be a one-off, but I've made a lot of these. This was a show at the V&A. Do you know the hat designer Stephen Jones? Does he travel? Stephen Jones and Philip Treacy were kind of, when I first started making hats, were the kind of only two designers that you would see in magazines. I'd buy lots of magazines at that time. And I see these crazy hats. And I bought a copy along of Vogue Brazil. I don't know whether you've seen Vogue Brazil this month. Nearly every page has a hat. So I know there's not a lot of hat wearers in Rio, except on the beach. But in magazines, hats seem to sell other things. So, you know, Beyonce wearing the hat in an editorial with the right bikini, the combination of things make things more desirable. Anyway, Stephen Jones. I was putting up the show for my students, and the phone rang, and Stephen Jones was on. He was on the phone. He said, "Hi, it's me." And I was like, "Stephen Jones on the phone." And I was quite excited about this. And he said, "Because I want to put your hat in my exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London." And I was like, "You do?" And he said, "You know what?" I said, "Boy," he goes, "I wish I'd designed that hat." And so I think that's the nicest compliment I've got. So that he ended up showcasing, I think there was 8 new hat designers that he kind of boosted our careers and put this beautiful runway in amongst all these statues. And this is one of the hats that I showed in the exhibition. This is kind of how I draw. It's quite naive. I like color. I like making a lot of mess and quite expressive marks. I often start with collage when I have a blank page in front of me. For me, the easiest thing is just to chop things up out of magazines and stick things down, and just so you've made a mark on the page, and then I feel I can make a start with thinking, and you can see different textures and colors. I did these the last time I came to Rio. I made a little studio in my friend's house. And then I maybe start making them out of metal or plastic and making experiments in different materials. This is an inflatable handbag in front of my dad's print. And I think they complement each other. Again, this hat is probably the most used in fashion. There's a very funny stylist and agent called Mandy Leonard in London, and she's sick to the back teeth of seeing this hat in images. And she said, I never want to see this hat in a picture again. I keep turning the pages and I keep seeing the same hat. But yeah, it keeps traveling. This is my kind of amber collection of I started doing eyewear and trying to mix up the jewelry with the hats and the visors. And this color of acrylic is made in Lapa. And you can only buy it in Lapa. And there's no other place to buy this particular color, which is quite fascinating. Can't really see that image, sorry. Another big kind of moment, I suppose, in the build-up to my I've never really thought of it as a career, I have to say. It's all been a kind of happy accident. But I got my nerve up. When the children were a little bit older, I thought I should go to Paris and show my stuff to different houses. So I made some appointments and got on a train and finally got all my work from under the bed, which had been hiding for about 10 years. And I booked an appointment with Givenchy and Balenciaga and Louis Vuitton, all in the same day. Just to thought, get it out of the way, get it out of the way. Boom, boom, boom. And I met Riccardo Tisci at Givenchy in the morning, and I dressed up as Audrey Hepburn. I had very short hair then, and I wore a little black dress with a bow and flat shoes. And I thought, well, if I'm going to Givenchy, I've got to just look like Audrey Hepburn. And that'll swing the deal. And it worked. He didn't even look in the hat box. He barely opened the book. He sat with me and he said, you look right. Which is slightly worrying, but he said, I think I can work with you. And then we made these. It was his first year at Givenchy, and he loves plastic, and he calls me Plastic Fantastic. And so we made lots of. This was like an orchid. We did also we did a sort of orbital, similar sort of spaceship halo, and we also did a visor with ears. And another time, but yeah, he was a very interesting designer because he also likes making. He's a textile designer, really. He's a knitter, so he's really interested in different combinations of materials. And as the runway, they were still kind of making things as they were going out. There was a girl knitting all this mohair train as the things were going out. And Hubert Givenchy he would always ring up just before the show to say, you know, bonne soirée, good luck for your show. And it was a very exciting time. And I met, I call him Mario Testosterone, but you would know him as Mario Testino. And who's the stylist? Who's the amazing stylist with the wooden shoes? I'm trying to remember her name. Oh, I've completely forgotten her name. But anyway, they were choosing hats for the front cover of French Vogue. And they came in and they saw these on the shelf. They dropped one of them as well, actually, but that was a shame. Smash. But they ended up putting just these black hats on the front cover of Italian Vogue, and I'm not sure I put that image in, which is a bit stupid. This is another famous person wearing one of my hats. Students like famous people and celebrity. Celebrity goes down very well in Brazil, I think. I've made a lot of these cat hats. Again, these are the collage is on the right. This is kind of how I would draw and experiment in my sketchbook. I realised we didn't play the film, did we? We should have played the film. Yeah, maybe we should play the film. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, we were meant to start with a movie. I completely forgot that. It's like 2 halves to it. I think that might be the same one twice, but anyway. A very good way of showing the fashion without having to put on a show is making a movie. And again, lots of my friends have started making, the guy that made this film is called Harry Reevely. And he mostly he does advertising for fashion, for big mainstream companies. Maybe he makes like a advert for Marks and Spencer's or, you know, very well-known kind of high street brands, which is not that creative. So when he's feeling creative, he wants to work with people like me and be a bit more experimental. So he had this amazing studio space and built that stage. And it was a huge project. He's not actually that happy with the results, but he made little clips. And I'll show you another one of his films. Should we show what was the other one? There's another. I think we'll show number 3 is Not a Peep, it's called. Yeah. Yeah, this is great. This is an animation a friend of mine made for me. It took him 3 years. He has a similar kind of work. You know, he does very boring work in the week. So he does exciting projects at night. But his dad's a famous architect who sadly just died, Willie Alsop. So he has the similar background to me. I hope you get all the arty references. How is your art history? Yeah, that's by Piers Alsop, but he's a fantastic artist. And he's put the pieces in the model. Whether you can recognize some of the pieces, he's made them into the structures. So she's walking through a bracelet, and the bracelet's spinning above her head, and it's just playing with scale. And for me, that's perfect, because when you're making things, it doesn't matter what size it is. it's hard to explain. You know, if I'm making something, I can imagine that could also be a building. I mean, this looks like the church in Rio, right? And I've got a picture of me next to it. It's the same shape. It just depends what scale you're looking at it. And I know that makes me different, because I know people that I studied with in fashion found that quite problematic. And I think my spatial awareness, because of the background and the people that I kind of grew up with, I see things little and big, all the time. It could be a building, it could be a watch, it could be an aeroplane. I feel like I probably could design anything, given the kind of opportunity. Anyway, let's get back to the talk. It's a bit of a jumble. So how am I doing for time? Is it very long? How long have I got? We still have time. I still want to talk about the school. So yeah, the eyewear. And feel free to come and have a look later and try things on and take photographs and selfies of hats and sunglasses. So this is me doing production. This is the one that I've got on. This is the Rio Carnival cuff. On sale now. This is a recent project making a giant plastic poppy. Lots of different materials: metal, plastic, leather. And this is a poster for me and my dad's show. We did one in London and one in Jersey, and we did a performance. And one of the actors in the film that you just saw is a fantastic dancer at the Royal Ballet, and so he became friends after being in the film, and he ended up performing in our show. And these are just images of the hats in magazines, things just to cheer me up on a grey day in London. Yeah, this is the exhibition in London. So this is the hats meeting my dad's art, which is completely new for me. That I never thought that would happen, I have to say. And this is the 3D printed version. This is the first model. The next one I'm going to do, I'm going to fill in the spaces so it looks more like a glitter ball with facets. And we're going to chrome it so you can see your face. It's going to be really shiny and silver. And again, this is one of my strange collages. Okay, so this is the school. This is Kensington. This is where I go 3 days a week. I teach accessories, footwear, hats, and bags. I've been doing that since 2012. I mean, this is kind of things that I've taken from the RCA website, thinking about, maybe you want to think about coming to London and studying in the future and doing your MA. You need to save up quite a lot of money, or you need to get a sponsor. Probably finding a rich husband or a sponsor might be easier. But there are different bursaries available, so it is worth thinking about. And sometimes you can get part of your fees paid, or you get your first year, and then maybe you have a year out, and then you come back and do your second year. And they've started teaching these platforms, so the students are much more aware of the economy of fashion and different systems of making fashion. And some students are even thinking about designing things that are in the virtual realm. So they're designing costumes for video games, so people inside video games look better. So I don't know whether you play video games, but people are usually really badly dressed. Just thinking about Lara and those early Tomb Raider, or Tomb Raider, I think you call it. Tomb Raider. Yeah, Tomb Raider, got it right. I watched Tomb Raider the other day. But the video games, she doesn't look so good. And I think my boss, she's called Zoe Broach. She's quite a character and a kind of tour de force of creativity. And she's very big on video games and wants students to be much more, working much with technology and different systems of making fashion, because not everyone's going to get a job at Louis Vuitton or Balenciaga or Givenchy. There's a handful of people who are going to get those positions. So there's other ways of making a living. And you might need like 3 jobs to exist on this planet. There's some quite interesting shapes and forms being produced. This is a very interesting student who's now working with air, and we're going to be working on the machine to make some of the structures out of air. And he's padded these things for the crit. And this guy, he made very strange shoes, metal shoes, and it's quite Gareth Pugh, I suppose, isn't it? But it's a very different school to when I went there at the moment. It's very experimental. It's very, it's much more artistic, and it's much more thoughtful. There's less tailoring. There's less kind of classic clothing design going on. It's much more new thinking, new ways of being. And these are just things that I've collected that I like, that I found interesting in the show. I mean, this student graduated from MA in fashion and there were absolutely no clothes at all. It's just sticky goo. And she's got a job at Nike. She's in New York now doing the color. So it worked. But she didn't make any clothes. I even found that quite challenging. A beautiful space. This is all the light. It's a bit like tropical jungle in the big middle of London. They store a lot of stuff in their cupboards, a bit like me. They collect things. They're hoarders, these people. This is one of my hat students. She did a hat on top of a hat on top of a hat. She's now become an eyewear student. And I'm going to start an eyewear course at the RCA, which I'm very excited about. That'll start this time next year. And she did a performance with her hats. That's a design of a shoe. It looks a bit like one of my drawings. And that's what she ended up doing. Can you see these? She's now designing shoes for Nicholas Kirkwood. You know about him here? And this is like an installation. So my current boss is much more interested, rather than doing runway shows, she likes to do these sort of installations or vignettes. So the pieces are positioned on a model, and so people can take photographs of different ideas and different viewpoints. Maiko was one of my students when I first arrived at the school. She ended up going back to Japan to work for Issey Miyake. And she made these things, and then Bjork ended up wearing them in her video. This is a fantastic shoe designer. And she made these exceptional pieces out of leather, ceramics, and it's based around the idea of a lobster, and it functions. I mean, they're really beautiful shoes that you can wear, but they're also works of art. I've never really met anyone quite like her. There's quite a lot of her work in this. That's the first lobster shoe. So if you can imagine, if you eat lobster, you have to crack it open. She cracked open the shoe. And there was a metal device that went into the heel, which was like the metal that you take the meat out of the claws of the lobster. And she presented it like she was in a restaurant, and she had her friend sitting very neatly, kind of like a geisha girl, and she would deliver these shoes. And some of the shoes had dumplings and food on them. It was fantastic. But she was kind of like the beginning of the way that all the students seem to be presenting now, but she did it, I don't know whether we've seen anything quite as good since. This is a more recent student who's got lights and making beautiful bags, but they have kind of lights underneath. There's a bit of technology involved. She's an interesting student. She wants to make, in the same way I use a wooden hat block to form the hats, she wanted to make a jacket form. So she could form a jacket, and she did make black jackets formed around these shapes. And this girl was working with no gravity, zero gravity clothing. She's quite a strange one. Colin Horgan, he's now got his own label. He finished a couple of years ago. It's all kind of iridescent plastics. But some of I have to say, my students, in a way, I feel it's a huge amount of money to go to the RCA, and it's a huge amount of money to go to any school in the UK, to be honest. But if you did choose accessories, I do feel that you would get work. All the students I've taught are all in work, and they've now been able to pay back their debts. If you're a fashion student where you're making all the garments, there's just less jobs. Not many people can design shoes. It's just worth thinking about. Not many people can design eyewear. There's like a handful of people who can do this. And just so you know, when I start the eyewear course, there's no other eyewear course that you can design. You learn about the optical side of seeing and sunglasses as protection. There's no course like it. So you'll not only be designing sort of things that would go on your head to help you do virtual reality or AI, you'll be designing things to help you see, putting lenses in front of your face, and sunglasses, which are protective pieces. So it's like a health aid and protection. But yeah, the students that I have actually do get jobs. Sportswear, many are at Brioni, and I've got people at Vivienne Westwood and Nicholas Kirkwood and Ismiyaki, and they stay in contact. It's a much smaller area, but I feel kind of hopeful that they've got a future, rather than just £20,000 a year and then you don't know what you're going to do at the end of it. So yeah, footwear, I feel I've really built up the footwear and accessories department. We've got our own studio now, and there's when I first started, I think we only had 6 students, and now I've got 40. And so I've gone from 6 to 40 in 5 years, they're very happy with me. And we've got a studio and designated materials and better technical staff. But the students really learn how to make and think. And are building the stuff. They might never make the things ever again, but while they're there, they learn how to make shoes and bags and hats and eyewear. I think the best bit about this is the text I got from the kind of the vision for the whole school, is to sort of enhance the last one, when it sort of the knowledge exchange, sharing things, and starting innovative practice seems to be how you could actually generate a career out of it, of thinking creatively and sharing with the whole school. So I like the idea that my students are working in fashion, but they're also working in product, and they're also working with the science department, and sometimes even the music school. So we're connecting all the schools because we've got the music school next door, and we've got Imperial next door. So we're connecting all the triangle schools together. And this is the lovely food dumpling girl again. She made this fantastic. It's a dumpling. It's a dumpling. It's a shoe. It's just adorable. This is this year. It's very dark, isn't it? More shoes. This is the eyewear. Because we've got a new dean. He's very excited because he's an engineer. He's also got a Brazilian wife. There's a Brazilian connection. And he's very excited about the eyewear course. And he's very excited about it in terms of measurements as well, because he told me that Brazilian people's heads are bigger. And he's got anthropological studies that Brazilian heads are one of the biggest head sizes you can get. And we would have to adapt certain glasses. And when I first started making glasses, I realized that nearly all my customers were Asian. And certain nose shapes don't fit my glasses. So they would see them. They go, oh wow, I want to buy them. Then they were trying to put them on, and they wouldn't fit. And the same happens with African faces. There's sometimes the bridge on my shades don't fit. So there's tiny little adjustments you've got to do for different head sizes. And the dean's very excited about this, that you do the whole kind of anatomical study of the head, just to engage in a new area of design. Not many people think about designing on the face, but we're all going blind, and we're all going to need glasses, and we need lenses in front of our eyes to help us see. I can't see now. But this is an exciting student. She's Alice. She made these glasses where you change the lenses, different colors. You can adapt. This is more kind of experimental fashion piece. And this was meant to be like different colored makeup for your eyes. This student made her own materials using kind of dust and leftover materials. She made her own plastic. This is an accessory student this year. This is the giant nose. It looks like my dad's nose. And one of my students made a handbag in the shape of a giant nose. There's a little nose. There's a big nose. This is a fantastic Brazilian student. This is Renata Ribeiro. She's from São Paulo. And these are her clothes on the left. And she did these wiggy things on the right as well. She did a fantastic collection. Back to that shoe girl again. How am I doing for time? Should we show some more films and then we have some questions? Yeah. And this is the thoughts on inflatable structures. Some of the students seem to be getting excited about using this new machine we've got. This is a very funny boy that made inflatable genitals. Giant ones, covered in mohair. So yeah, there's some quite extraordinary work going on at the RCA at the moment. Quite groundbreaking and very creative. This is a silicone shoe with lights in. And the knit department, I have to say, if you're interested in stretch and structure and textiles, learn how to knit and get yourself a knitting machine. You will get a job. All the sportswear companies all need knitters, and they're the ones with the money. So think about being a knitter. This is all knitted. This is a fantastic jacket made out of, it looks like torn paper, but it actually was textiles, but it looked like kind of broken mirrors. This is Holly. She's a kind of feminist, very tough girl, kind of expressing all the kind of turmoil of being a woman in her designs. More inflatables. I think that's nearly it. Yeah, become a crucible where artists, curators, engineers, fashion designers, and scientists create new knowledge. I was very excited about that when I found that out. The dean wrote that, and I respect him a lot. Lots of people have a problem with him, but I have to say I really don't. He's a thinker, he's a maker, he's an engineer, and he's excited about my eyewear course, so that's good. I think that's the end of the slides, but maybe we should show one more film and then we could do some questions. Well, I hope I've kind of, it's been a little bit of a jumble sale in terms of imagery and what I've said. I hope you've kind of just got a flavour of how my mind operates. And this is another one of Harry's films. He kind of gets it. I wanted it to be like, you know, when you're on Flamengo Beach and you see the aeroplane taking off, but he put a stealth in there instead, so it's a bit more menacing. That was actually meant to be about Rio, that film, and that was based on a collection that I made with the amber plastic. I suppose, yeah, that what I wanted to go back to at the beginning, I've been here 10 times in 4 years. I came for the architecture. I kind of got so much more. And I get that it's the light, it's the music, it's the people. And I get a lot of energy when I come here, and I want to make stuff. And as soon as I arrive, I want to start making things. And I think it is something about this city. I don't know whether it's about the whole of Brazil, because I haven't been to the rest of Brazil yet. I've barely traveled beyond Rio. And it's something, there's something about this place that makes me want to make more of this. And yes, I've got much more than I bargained for, I suppose. So it's been a kind of an incredible adventure. So it's nice to share what I do, and hopefully you understand a little bit more about my aesthetic and what goes on in here. It's a bit of a jumble sale, and I have to say, as a disclaimer, at the age of 47, I have found out I have chronic dyslexia. So maybe that explains the jumble sale of thoughts that I have fizzing around in my mind, but also maybe explains why I have to make things to try and illustrate my thoughts and feelings and emotions, and lots of it seems to be about light. And if you ever do get a chance to get the book I mentioned about from Mahola Nagy, it's nearly all about light and how to move light around and how to create beautiful shadows. And for me, fashion is about making a good shape and making a good form and casting a fantastic shadow, or sitting on the right chair, positioning yourself in the right doorway. My dad's got this theory that you won't get the job unless they don't like if they don't like the shape of you in the doorway when you arrive, you're not going to get the job. And I was like, so literally people are looking at your silhouette when you arrive. And it's a bit like when I went to the Givenchy thing. I knew, you do your research. What are they wearing in the place where you want to work? Because they're not going to, if I turned up to Givenchy in this, they're not going to give me the job. You know, so you've got to do your research, find out what everyone's wearing, where you want to work. How are they doing their hair? Which watch are they wearing? What shoes are they wearing? Where are they going to drink in the evening? Do all your research, then you get the job. It's barely about what you're doing. Once you're in there, you can do what you like. But he's got this theory that's about the shape you make in the doorway. I do like that. And we can create interesting shapes and forms with textiles and other things around our body to create an image of how we want to be seen. And it's the same with these. You know, I look very different without these. How I look more friendly without my glasses, but I can see with the glasses. So even down to details like frames and earrings and things that we put on, everything is an expression of who we are. And that's kind of why I do this. And that's why I try to make movies with friends of mine who have a similar mindset, so we can work together on storyboards and create bizarre shapes and forms and visions of the future of how we might be looking in the future. Does that make any sense? Do we have any questions? Oh, you want to clap? Thank you very much. Question one. Yeah. Oh, you got a microphone.
Yeah.
Falo.
Muito bom. Você falou antes da palestra sobre... Você entende, não entende, Flora? Yeah? You understand?
Falo quando eu não entendo.
Okay, otherwise I speak in English, but I don't like much. So. Você falou que a sua inspiração inicial era fazer chapéu para aeromoças, né? For stewardess, né?
Yeah.
Você chegou a fazer alguma vez algum chapéu para alguma companhia aérea? For any airline?
I wanted to. I nearly got a job with Qantas to do the hats and a little brooch for the girls on Qantas, and it just fell through at the last minute. I was gutted about that. But my dream still is to work with the costume for airline. I mean, maybe it'd be nice to get the red one. Maybe on Virgin, maybe that's a bit directional, I don't know. I could never be an airline stewardess, though. It's a very, very difficult job. But yeah, uniforms, you work with uniforms. I know that it's a very interesting area because you want people to feel good about themselves in their environment, if they're selling things or they're serving your food or you've got to look good, but you've also got to be comfortable and feel good in your kit. So that would be a challenge. The red one's a bit softer. You must come and have a feel of what... This one's actually quite hard. There's different sureness that the different factories have made them over the years. The red one's the newest. So it's much more soft. You can see the difference. Pass them around. But look, that's quite tough. And this one's really squidgy soft. Any more questions?
Hi.
Hello.
You mentioned that you did a MA. I didn't see, like, did you had it in textiles? Did you study textiles more intensely? Because it appears that you have like a big passion about it for textiles and different materials.
I did an MA in women's wear. I did my BA in fashion where you could do men and women. But then on the MA you had to choose, which I found quite annoying actually. You had to choose between doing menswear, women's wear. I didn't do textiles, but I always printed. I learned how to print textiles. I can hand knit. I can't do the knitting like the students do on the machine. I wish I could. I should probably learn. But I didn't study textiles. But the way they teach you in the UK, when you first start, you do a foundation year where you try everything. You try, a bit of sculpture, painting, ceramics, textiles, fashion, and then you have to make a choice of what you do for your BA. I did 3 years doing women's wear, mescla with men's wear, and then 2 years after that did more women's wear, where I did the inflatable structures. But I realise now, if accessories had existed then in that school, I probably would have chosen accessories or shoes. And I kind of, it came like 2 years later. I was like, and they invented this new course. Because the 2-year MA, although I met fantastic people, it was more about networking. It was more like building finding all your collaborators. And I'm still working with the same people. The guy that we did the hat with, that is passing around, the inflatable, we still work together now. He lives in Antwerp, but we became really good mates then, and we just always worked together since. I think it's really important to go to school, even if you do terrible work for 3 years and you don't know what you're doing and it's a complete disaster, you'll meet fantastic people and you have this network. And so coming here and having Fabio running your school, you've got this really tight network and support. So when you're feeling like, oh God, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I can't do this anymore. This blank page is driving me nuts. You know, you lose your the will. You've got your people around you to support you. And I have that. I really have that. I have that with my family, and I have that with that school. And that's kind of why I went back there to teach, because it was just the most fantastic experience in terms of sharing between all the different departments. And literally there's 8 floors, and you can just run up and down the stairs meeting potential collaborators and makers, people in metal and leather and plastic. And now the students are making their own plastic, pouring their own materials, and environmentally friendly plastic as well, making stuff out of waste materials and dust that would be thrown away. They're making into new stuff. So it's just really inventive place to be. I'm really glad that I'm there now. I've seen the transition from the old RCA to the new RCA. I loved the old version, but I think I fit better with the new version. And actually the fashion students have, the knitters are inside the fashion group. They're not separate. They're studying in the same space. So they feel very connected with the people who are making the garments. But the knitters, it's like doing 2 MAs, because you're making your own materials, then you're making the form. Whereas you're a fashion student, you can just go to the fabric shop and buy it. You know, it seems kind of lazy being a fashion student in that sense, but the knitters, it's another level. I think it's really interesting, and because it's a structure as well. If you're learning how to knit, those structures can be used in architecture, they can be used in furniture, and other stuff away from the body. It's funny. I wanted to do a kind of an MPhil. Do you know what an MPhil is? It's like a pre-PhD. It's like, so you would do more written work and study fashion. And I made a proposal to my then teacher called Structures for the Body in Space. And that was the title. I was so pleased, wrote this huge big text, talked about architecture, talked about Oscar Niemeyer, talked about, all these Mexican architects I was obsessed with. And they were like, what is she doing? What does she want to do? But if someone had proposed that now to the school now, they'd be like, yeah, on it, yeah, come, that's perfect. So it's a bit tormenting that I wasn't allowed to do that. And there's even a school called Structures for the Body in Space now. It's got the same title. Yeah. So yes, it's a bit infuriating sometimes being ahead. I think maybe things have caught up with me now. Maybe I need to start something new. And I think that's where I'm doing the more installation pieces. But materials, sometimes, I start with a collage, or I go to the shop, and all the shops here they're kind of like the shops where you buy the stuff for your house. Like the things that go in the shower on the floor, and that kind of thing that stops you slipping over in the shower. Those kind of shops where it has all this sort of brushes and cleaning things and plastic nonsense, I spend a lot of time in there. And I get lots of inspiration. And there's an image, if you look at my Instagram, you'll see last week I had a sieve on my head, which is like a cover for the food, you know, to stop the flies. It's like a dome. But if you look at Instagram, it's House of Flora official. 2 images last week. There's literally, it's me in the shower with a sieve on my head. But that's how you sort of start playing with stuff. It's stuff and materials, I suppose. I wish I had bought, I bought the pieces, the finished pieces, and I have got a giant suitcase at home. I could have brought all these materials because I'm meant to be doing another talk in São Paulo on Monday, but they've cancelled the workshops. So I've got a suitcase. I've got a suitcase full of materials and tools and heat guns and hat blocks, and I probably should have brought that tonight to share with you. But maybe I could come another day because there's some really funny, but there's industrial materials that I like. Meshes, plastic meshes and things that you could weave with. Anyway, stop talking. Any more questions? Boa noite.
Hi, it's a great pleasure to meet you.
Hello.
It's a simple question. Do you have any tip for a beginner fashion student who want to work in the area, like creating amazing jewelries with different kind of materials?
Do you want to do jewelry or do you want to make clothes?
I don't know.
You don't know.
I don't know yet.
I think there's always a sign when people want to do everything. When I meet these students, they want to make a hat, they want to make the shoes, they want to make the bikini, they want to make the jacket, they want to make the coat, they want to make the... It means they're going to have their own company. I always think that's a sign, if they want to do everything. And I always did want to do everything. And I still do want to do everything. I suppose for the students I'm teaching, they're really finding out about who they are. I think that's the most important thing, is to know yourself. You know, what are you into? What are you obsessed with? You know, do you have obsessions? You know, where do you look? When I'm feeling like, oh God, I'm so depressed, I can't think. I go back to those books. I go back to my favorite books. I watch my favorite films. I read my favorite books. I go and see my best friends. I kind of gather all this stuff. I think the most important thing as a designer is to understand your own aesthetic and what it is that you like. And you can sort of take apart your life in a way. You can go back to your childhood and think, why do I like that color so much? And then you go back and you look at photographs or you talk to your parents and you think, the things that you were looking at as a child go in. You suck it up like a sponge. So if there's an interesting bit of wallpaper or a ceramic that you remember or a tile or just a funny object that you became obsessed with, that can often shape who you are and what you're into. So it's almost like decoding who you are. But I always ask students, what are you obsessed with? I quite like the ones that have obsessions. And that could be in anything. It doesn't have to be about fashion. It could be an obsession with certain films or gaming or football or anything, and you know, even archaeology, or they come with all sorts of fixations, and that can anything can turn into fashion. But I think playing is the way forward. Playing with materials on the body, or near something that looks like a body. You know, if you've got a mannequin in your flat, and having some way of fixing things together, whether it's sewing, it doesn't have to be sewing. That's quite an old way of joining things together. Students seem to have found other ways of fixing things or stapling things, and yeah, I think it's mostly playing with materials. Does that answer? Is that too long?
Hi, good evening.
Hello.
Could you talk more about environmental materials you use in your brand?
I have to say I'm probably the least environmentally friendly designer on the planet at this point, although I'm moving in the right direction with the 3D printed materials, because I've got a student who's making some material with pineapple. So we can do the 3D printed version of that hat with pineapple fiber, apparently, which I'm quite excited about. All I can say is that we have a mending service. So when you buy a piece, if it breaks, you send it back and I'll fix it. So hopefully it doesn't go in the bin or in the dumpster faster than, you know. So I'd like to make high quality things. But I also, there's obviously a very negative thing about plastic right now. Everybody is anti-plastic right now. But unfortunately, most of the world is made of plastic. And even the paint on the stage has plastic in. Nearly all the materials that you're sitting and using and wearing has plastic in or on. All the makeup on your face, all the technology, everything is basically plastic. So we did this, and we're still doing this. So yeah, it's not like I kind of say that it's okay to make things out of acrylic. But there are students who are working out that with the acetate, the eyewear material acetate is much more easy to recycle. And you can heat it up and reuse it. Acrylic, they're working out ways of smashing it up and reusing it and making it more like a dust situation. The girl that made the glasses, she ground down some of the acrylic to make dust out of it and reformed it. But still, you're still making things out of plastic. But it's just, I suppose, it's to be aware of the whole process from start to finish. You know, where's it from? Who made it? What dyes are you in it? What? Just to kind of the beginning and the end, and how long is it going to last? But these are 20 years old and they're still going strong. There's some plastics. I write lots about plastic. I do essays, and I'm a member of the Plastics Historical Society. And there's a museum in Bournemouth by the seaside, which has a plastics collection. And they have this archive of things that went wrong. So we have this vacuum cleaner called a Dyson. I don't know whether you have those here. But there's this very famous designer from the RCA as well. He'd studied at the Royal College. But one of his first designs, they didn't mix up the plastic right. So it kind of reverted and went all sticky and gooey, and it's not got the right chemicals in it to hold itself together. So yeah, some people get it really wrong. But I have to say, plastic is here to stay. It's got a really bad press right now. I have this argument with students. So certain students don't like using fur or leather either. So there's a fur, leather, and plastic kind of like, no, we're not doing that. But if you make fur out of plastic, is that any better than using a dead animal? Do you know what I mean? So these decisions and choices that you've got to make. You know, what kind of designer are you? Who are you making these things for? How long are they going to keep them? You know, what price are you putting? If you're putting a bigger price on it, it becomes more precious. These are quite expensive things. They're not throwaway, like pound shop items. So I think if someone's going to buy one of these things, it's quite coveted. It's more like an artwork that they might have on their shelf or keep for special occasions. It's not like I'm selling masses of these things. So it's very small volume, so I don't feel so bad about it. But with the acrylic, if I could change all the acrylic to acetate, that would be a really amazing direction. I went to a fantastic factory in Italy that make nearly all the acetate that you see that looks like tortoiseshell, like the ones that I've got on here. It looks like, it's trying to look like turtle. and it's the production system is fantastic. It's made from cotton. These are made from cotton. So I never realized that. So it's cotton mixed with acetone that you use for taking your nail varnish off. And they just mix it and mix it and mix it and add colors to it. And it's like making spaghetti. You know when you make the machine, when you turn and it forces out these strings of color? That's how they're making this plastic. They chop it up into little pieces and build huge boxes as big as this, as deep as that. And then they have a kind of like a cheese slice that they pull to slice off the top layer. So they've made all these different colors, chopped it all up, arranged it. So when you see the colors, you can see it all the way through. This little, it's not like a print on the surface. It goes, the colors go all the way through the whole piece. So yeah, acetate is certainly more environmentally friendly, and you can recycle it very, very easily. And yeah, that's as far as I got, really. That's quite new.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. I did bring an inflatable hat. I've got to inflate it. I've got one in the bag, actually.
Yeah, so I would like to know, the person himself can inflate it, and then if you have to travel, you can
deflate it, yeah.
And the other fabric, for example, a material is around.
This?
Like this? This is not inflatable. Huh? For example, on the picture, there was inflatable and knitting. Huh?
Yeah.
So you have the inflatable thing in structure, in plastic.
Yeah, inflatable with air, yeah.
And then they put the other form,
yeah,
for example, in a fabric, in knitted.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the person have to be care not to make a hole in it?
Yeah, that's a really big problem. When I did my collection, obviously everyone else is using needles and pins, and there's lots of sharp things, and then you could smoke inside as well. So there were cigarettes, but that's a problem. Models are always smoking before they went out on the runway. So I did make a promise 20 years ago never to make any more inflatables, but I've broken the promise. And they are subject to puncture. But you can repair things.
Yes, as a flat, a tire.
Yeah,
huh?
Yeah, tiny little patches.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's problematic. But it's very, for large scale pieces, like my brother's an architect, he goes to the Biennale in Venice to do an exhibition. He wanted to make this big wall, a bit like the size of the wall at the back with the colours. He made an inflatable wall with all the images and the text and the photographs printed on the plastic. He gets there, inflates it.
I like it.
And then folds it away, puts it back in the case. So he doesn't have to pay for any shipping. It's actually, in a way, it is more environmental because you're not paying to go on the plane. You can just go on the train and you can put it in your suitcase and and air is free.
Yes, and it also isolates, huh?
Yeah, I think that probably is a better answer to the environmental question, actually, is that the future is air. I think fashion and volume should be air, and air's free. So for the time being. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. If you want to try things on, have a look and pose.